At this point now, a few weeks later, we've really had the opportunity to dive into the Starfield gameplay, look at some of the minor details, uncover some of the hidden systems, and let me tell you, I got some feelings. Some of these will definitely be somewhat surprising, as I think the game may be going in a direction that some people don't actually realize. And there are some pretty surprising details that come out when we compare this new gameplay to past leaks and even more obscure interviews. We'll definitely be getting into some crazy theories in this video based on all of that, in particular with some of those leaks, but it also is important to remember when we go into this that we've only actually seen about 13 minutes of gameplay. It is a drop in the bucket in the game overall, and we don't know exactly how it'll play as there are a ton of features we know basically nothing about. But the reality is, many of us are sitting here waiting to find out more on Starfield. And while we wait, there's been a ton of debates comparing Starfield to No Man's Sky. But instead of wasting all of your free time in Twitter arguments, why not just try today's video sponsor, No Man's Sky, for yourself? No Man's Sky gives you a massive galaxy to explore. This is a game where you could fly around space, pick any of the various planets you like, land on it, build up your own base there, maybe even get in a little bit of a fight with the locals, and then when you're done and sick of it, simply fly away and find another planet to call home. Because there's literally an infinite number of procedurally generated locations in this universe, each with their own unique biomes and life forms. And the game really is something for everyone. Build up a sprawling settlement with some pets and settlers and even a variety of vehicles to make things more interesting, or for the more hardcore players out there, you can struggle to survive in harsh environments, relying on crafting and exploration, all the while getting battered by toxic storms and even ship-to-ship combat. And the best part is, you don't have to do this alone, as you could fully play with some of your friends or even strangers. The game has gotten an insane number of updates since launch, adding in a ridiculous amount of new content, and it's available just about everywhere. You can get it on PC, Xbox, and PlayStation, and right now is a phenomenal time to do that as it is heavily discounted with the Steam Summer Sale. So stop arguing on Twitter and click on that link in the description to try No Man's Sky for yourself. And thank you to Hello Games for sponsoring this video. But one of the biggest things that strikes me when looking at Starfield is it really feels like this is two games fused together as one. That does feel like a rather odd description to say out loud, but at the same time, I think it actually makes a lot of sense. It almost feels like there is a massive expansion over what was there in Fallout 4 as far as repeatable content goes, and you kind of being your own story. I think Starfield will begin with the familiar Bethesda Game Studios opener. You create a character as a part of Argo's extractors and go through this mining sequence we saw briefly in the gameplay. During this mining sequence, you're going to find an artifact, have some flashbacks, and then get introduced to Constellation as you kind of embark on this journey, or don't. As I think this will be one of the first real opening moments in Starfield. You'll have the initial very on-rails intro to the game that all of the Bethesda Game Studios games have, and that's why we love alternate start mods. But I think shortly after this moment, you're going to have that second step out moment Todd Howard keeps talking about, where you gain access to the world more properly, and even here, not just this world, but a bunch of different planets to explore. And in many ways, I think this is where you gain access to the second game of Starfield. And to put it simply, I think Starfield will both have the more traditional Bethesda Game Studios game set in space, so Skyrim in space as many people are describing it, but then separately a resource collection exploration based colony builder that is a completely separate thing that you'll probably be lightly introduced to, but you don't have to play. And even in a recent interview, I think Pete Hines really backed up this theory.
Or you could just play the main story and be like, I want a kind of experience that I'm guided through so that I kind of get to see stuff, and I might stop here and there. Oh, there's a cool side quest that I got, but I want something that sort of leads me through, because I'm a little, it can be a little daunting to say you can go do whatever I want. Like, ooh, I don't know what I should do. So
I think the way this game will handle what I'm considering two games is the main story will gradually introduce you into the second game. Similar to how in Fallout 4, early on, you have to build a settlement, or at least do the introductory steps of creating your own settlement. In Starfield, you'll have to at one point create an outpost somewhere, do some of the basics, as well as maybe fly to and conduct surveys on a few of the miscellaneous procedurally generated planets. But that is really all you'll have to do around this, and then if you actually want to dive into these features deeper, that is your prerogative. You can make that decision later on, or even right then dive into it in the game. And it's not something the main story will hold your hand into. It'll give you that little taste or get your feet wet, then go off and do main story things like all of the other Bethesda Game Studios games. And I think this is one of the big reasons that some people are criticizing the showcase from Bethesda. I think Bethesda struggled to show off these two sides of Starfield, where the second game got a lot of the attention, showing 1,000 planets to explore, the crazy shipbuilding, outposts, and many people are left wanting a more on rails and familiar experience, where a lot of people are saying I would much rather have 5 handcrafted planets than 1,000 procedurally generated planets. But I think the case is we literally have both. Starfield is confirmed to have more handcrafted content than any other Bethesda game, which sounds great, but what does that actually mean? It's such an arbitrary line. We know that the game will have 4 major cities, and New Atlantis will be the biggest city ever in a Bethesda Game Studios game. Todd Howard has confirmed that. That alone is pretty exciting. That is actually getting pretty close to the 5 handcrafted planet desire that we were talking about. But even the idea of 4 major cities, that's a pretty arbitrary measure. The thing that did it for me was this quote around 200,000 lines of dialogue, and even further, a silent protagonist. Todd Howard confirmed during an interview after the showcase that Starfield will in fact have 200,000 lines of dialogue, and Bethesda confirmed in a tweet that Starfield will have a silent protagonist. And it's also important to remember that is 200,000 lines of dialogue as of right now. The game is still 6 months to a year away from release, so that number will only go up, you have to imagine. 200,000 lines of dialogue is more dialogue than Fallout 4 and Skyrim combined. Fallout 4 had 111,000 lines of dialogue and Skyrim had 60,000 lines of dialogue. And Fallout 4, of course, had a voiced protagonist, which was thousands of those lines of dialogue. Starfield, again, doesn't have a voiced protagonist. So what this means is Starfield is going to have more conversation options and people to talk to than any other Bethesda Game Studios game ever, and frankly, it's not even close. It's going to have over twice as much talking as any other Bethesda Game Studios game. Pete Hines expanded on this also in that recent interview.
Wait, I did that quest, but I did this completely different thing, and you sort of start to appreciate all of the choices that you could have made you didn't even realize were an option. Like, oh, I didn't even think about doing that. Like, oh yeah, I just ran in and stole his ship and shot all of his crew members and took off. Like, you can do that? Like, oh yeah, you can do anything. Like that, I think that is a special part of a Bethesda Game Studios game. And when we say epic RPG, we mean all of the stories, all of them.
Which to me, even though that's just a brief quote that I think a lot of people missed, that is exactly what I want from games like this. Having so many different dialogue choices that are reflective of my own character and some of the choices I've made with that character, that I could really have a different experience with some of the same people as somebody else who is playing in a different way. And although we have a lot of arbitrary values of this having so much handcrafted content, 200,000 lines of dialogue is a ton. Like, you will probably not get to all of that dialogue for a long time, until many years after this game comes out. And even just using this as a simple example, when we look back at that gameplay, we saw none of this. We didn't see branching quest lines during the trailer, we didn't see insane amounts of dialogue, because those are the familiar parts of a Bethesda game. But at least based off these numbers, this game will have more role-playing aspects compared to any of the other Bethesda games of the past decade. Pete Hines described how you could steal a ship, shoot all the crew members, and take off with it, just kind of stealing that ship, or even just dock enemy ships to engage in combat that way. Even when it comes to combat, there are different skills that determine how good you are in combat with different weapons, or even separately skills for ship combat, and this all serves to paint a picture of just how deep the combat mechanics and really broader RPG mechanics will go. And I feel like this is going to be a massive game. They just didn't really show us this side, at least not yet, because of course they had to show off the new stuff. Which, speaking of the new stuff, we also have the other side of things, which is the game we have to create in Starfield, where we're kind of the character creating the story. This being around our own exploration, but of course things like surveying and outpost building, perhaps even with some survival features. I think Starfield is likely to have tiers of planets. Tier 1 are going to be those story-focused ones that you are just simply brought to via the main story. Tier 2 are the procedurally generated planets with interesting things that are handcrafted or placed on them. And Tier 3 are the full procedurally generated planets, where everything was done by an AI, and there's not really a whole ton going on outside of the nature aspects, but more on that in a moment. And actually probably a Tier 4 or maybe even a Tier 0, where there are certain planets you just can't land on. Todd Howard said there were going to be 1,000 explorable planets. I wouldn't be shocked if there's something like 1,100 planets in this game, and some of them you just can't actually explore because of whatever science reason. And you could dive into how much interesting content will actually be on some of these miscellaneous and largely procedurally generated planets. We can see some of the planets that look very barren. This is one of the big critiques coming out of this gameplay. Although you can also see some that are very barren and then do have a city off in the distance, but perhaps that is just one of the major cities in the game. But will there be things like procedurally generated things to find, little cities, NPCs, etc.? Todd Howard gave an interview last year where he talks about procedural generation overall and how they largely use it for nature.
And so I think a mix is good. Procedural helps you, and we do still do some procedural quests and storytelling in those ways, or random encounters. It keeps it fresh, where we don't know what exactly is going to happen all the time, and the players don't know what's going to happen. But there's a difference between the world itself. We want to spend our time handcrafting the things that you can tell are handcrafted, whereas nature, computers can do a good job at putting trees and rocks and making landscape around that you can massage. So we want to make sure, for the scale of our development and our team, that we're touching the things that are most important. And if we can use procedural systems to generate content that keep the game kind of everlasting, then that's what we want to lean on.
Procedural generation is good at nature while they're handcrafting most of the other stuff. And even more recently, he talked about how some planets are just kind of ice balls and not really going to be all that interesting. And actually, as an aside to that, you have to wonder, will some of these planets have multiple biomes? It feels like in basically all space media, movies, video games, etc., when you go to a planet in space, it's just one thing. It looks one way and doesn't actually have different biomes or different sections looking differently. We don't know how it'll work in Starfield explicitly, but at one point we can actually see a current biome indicator on the scanner, which gets me hopeful. But talking about these planets that'll largely be nature focused and probably mostly untouched by humans, I think this is where the second half of the game is really going to come in and shine. Starfield will have a survey system, which will likely just be a core feature of the exploration overall. When you land on a planet, there'll be things to scan, and as you scan them, you are slightly closer to finishing the survey on that planet. This too will likely have some quest tie-ins, especially early on, but in the long haul, the scanning process will probably just be something some players choose to do in their own time. They like that completionist approach to the game. And overall, some people love this stuff. It's actually a big thing with Fallout 76, being a completionist, getting everything. And one of the things that makes me believe it'll be a big part of the game is even when you just hover over a planet, you can see how much of the survey you have completed. To me, that suggests that this will be a big component of the game. And you have to imagine that you'll be trying to find all of the unique creatures in this galaxy. That'll be an awesome goal for some people, but not for me. I don't actually enjoy that kind of stuff, and the part about this whole planet or us creating content on the planet ourselves aspect that gets me more excited is the Outpost mode. Outpost mode at face value looks like a very much so expanded version of the Fallout 4 settlement mode, but I think it's going to have a huge focus on resource collection, and I think that's where this transitions into something very different. We can see in the HUD as we place down this outpost that it is clearly labeled how many resources we are producing per minute here, and I envision this being a core part of the gameplay loop, almost like a mini RTS in Starfield. On this overview of the planet, you could see a ton of resource storage, which seems like it'll also be a core component, and you could even just see methane extraction going on in one of these other panning shots. I can envision a system where you set up outposts on a variety of planets to collect resources specific to that planet to advance yourself in the game. Research is introduced as a major new feature, and we can see how tech trees will even come into play. Research requires resources, and you'll need to have sprawling outposts to keep up with this research. Further, you'll spend these resources on building spaceships, continuing to expand your outposts, and likely even creating more advanced outposts. As a small taste of this, Pete Hines described how you can spend thousands of hours doing nothing but shipbuilding. Every ship is customizable to the nth degree, not just cosmetically, it goes much deeper than that. You could change what kind of shields you have and what kind of weapons you have. What do you want your ship to be good at? What trade-offs are you willing to make? I envision a gameplay loop where you can play the main story and get some pretty good ships, maybe even some prefab ships, so you just buy it fully built. You don't have to dive into the customization. But if you really want to dive into the system, you need a ton of resources. The way you're going to get a ton of resources is building settlements or outposts. And when you want more of the rare resources to either do more research or even create custom or better ships, you're going to need to build on different planets. Planets have a wide variety of different characteristics to them. In the scanner mode, we can see planets have certain kind of traits. There's a temperature variation, oxygen level difference, and even gravity differences. And I would imagine different planets will be easier or harder to build on based off of this. Early on, maybe you just can't build on planets with extreme temperatures. You need to unlock something or really research and then build something that will allow you to build on those planets that are a bit harder, kind of a higher tier. But I would imagine those planets may have special or rare resources, and that's why you want to invest in being able to build there. And planet traits could describe these conditions more broadly: harsh weather, resource abundance, or maybe even just aggressive creatures. And some of these traits could make what are otherwise forgettable planets have a lot more character in their overall setting. And you have to wonder how how many traits are there throughout? What trade-offs do certain traits have? We can see jump ranges on the ships in the gameplay. We know that the explorable area here is 50 light years wide. I imagine that you need to build up several successful outposts to be rich enough to gain the ability to explore the far reaches of this 50 light years. And maybe there's something special out there, whether it be an Easter egg, a hidden town, or something else for you to find and discover. Another part of this that will likely expand is with settlers. Past leaks have suggested that settlers will play a role with manning parts of your ship, like the weapons. Settlers will clearly play a rather large role on our ships, but this leak also suggests they'll play a much larger role with outposts, being able to occupy our outposts as we saw in the gameplay, but potentially even build up our outposts for themselves. So rather than us having to manually place down everything, we could have settlers start building things up their own, almost like sim settlements. With the leak also suggesting that the companion system is expanded where you can bring some of these people on missions with you. Especially as we're considering the procedural generation tech, I could picture a much expanded settler trait system, where you have specific characteristics and strengths and weaknesses for different traits on settlers. But settlers may also give you the ability to be somewhat hands-off with this entire process, whether it be taking over some of the defense measures on your spaceship or even just building some of the outposts for themselves so you could reap the benefits. And one other aspect that can make this all a lot more interesting is survival. Perhaps depending on how you play or the difficulty you choose with Starfield, there'll be more extreme difficulties where you really need to worry about producing helium-3 at an outpost to actually fuel your ship. You could truly get stranded somewhere. With all the different variables on planets, you can see how survival challenges can easily come into play, with extreme temperatures being a threat, maybe even toxic weathers or low gravity. We have an O2 to CO2 meter, but that seems to largely just be a stamina meter as of right now. But overall, lots of people swear by survival mode in Fallout 4, and you have to imagine Bethesda has noticed that. And it's a popular feature in many other space games like No Man's Sky. And we even do have a specific food research tree, so it definitely seems like they can lean into these elements somewhat. An optional mode in Starfield where it becomes a space exploration game where you truly have to fight to survive and rely on crafting and building up a base sounds awesome. I feel like that'd be a ton of fun. But looking at this overall, what I mean by the two games in Starfield is I think it'll have that traditional Bethesda Game Studios RPG, and I think that's what we didn't see much of during the gameplay during the showcase, at least not too explicitly. But also separately, there'll be a very repeatable aspect to this game that you'll be introduced to via the story, but you don't have to dive into if you don't want to. You can definitely see how some of the stuff in Starfield, like outpost building or even ship building, will be something that somebody spends 5 to 10 hours in, but then somebody else spends 1,000 hours completely diving into that, and that really becomes the game for them. But beyond that, I definitely had some other smaller observations and thoughts with Starfield. From the gameplay, it looks like we'll have open cities in Starfield, very similar to the open cities mod in Skyrim, where you can just seamlessly walk in and out of cities. We've heard from leaks now how there would supposedly be rovers and even the ability to fly in the atmosphere in Starfield, which honestly makes a lot of sense. Some of these planets look pretty massive, and being able to traverse them not just on foot or not just with our jetpack, but with some kind of rover or vehicle, or even flying around just in the sky, not in space, would be cool. I think a lot of people would enjoy that. And although we know you're not going to be able to fly down from space right onto a planet's surface, having two independent flying zones could make a lot of sense, or even just vehicles could make a lot of sense. There's the question of our own solar system. We could see Mars and our sun Sol in the trailer, would suggest that we'll at least be near Earth. To me at least, it seems likely that Earth will not in fact be explorable for one reason or another. One leak suggests that Earth had problems due to trash buildup in the upper atmosphere. That could be why we can't go there in Starfield. But Mars, on the other hand, may be quite extensive. We of course can see the Mars rover on Mars in the gameplay, which is pretty awesome just in general. But we also see this base, which looks quite a bit like Mars, and later on we see it from a different perspective and we see Cydonia written on it. Cydonia security apparently doesn't have a sense of humor, according to the writing from the teaser trailer from last year. Cydonia is in fact a region of Mars. That's a real thing. So you have to imagine that this Cydonia security, the Cydonia base, is actually on Mars. If a place has security, that typically would mean it is at least somewhat built up. And the reason I bring this all up is there is a secret fourth city in Starfield. Todd Howard has confirmed now that Starfield has 4 major cities: New Atlantis, Neon, and Aquila. And they've actually been very publicly showing these. We saw them in the gameplay. They actually got lore videos around them to explain them. But for some reason, there is a 4th major city that they are not revealing. We don't see it in the gameplay, and of course, there's no lore video to explain it to us. So why is there a fourth city that's a secret? Why isn't it just out there like all of the other ones? One theory is this is actually an alien city, and Starfield's plot does have a major first contact moment. It could be the city in the cover art. This city right here, we don't necessarily see during the gameplay. It could be New Atlantis, but it also definitely could not be. We see this a couple of times throughout some of this art, as well as it was actually seemingly on the Breaker background image that did leak, but then never was publicly posted otherwise. And even when you look at this cover art image, it does have a red planet. What if this is Mars? What if the secret fourth city is on Mars, and that's Sidonia? We don't really know, but it is interesting. They're keeping it a secret for some reason. Mars seemingly will have some kind of base on it in general, and we don't really know what's going on with Earth. It'll likely not be explorable, at least that's my theory, but why won't it be explorable? Another question I have is, does Starfield have co-op? That's something I've been thinking for actually about a year now, mainly because of this quote from Todd Howard from an old interview. Todd Howard describes games as having a rough roadmap as far as features and tech go.
But we have a little bit of a roadmap on our head, like this is the one that, like, as a base technology that this one adds.
The hypothetical here, and what I actually took from this quote, was, what if their roadmap, or the rough roadmap, had Fallout 76 adding multiplayer to the creation engine? Starfield is still on the creation engine. Fallout 76 was a bit of a branch off to get that multiplayer functionality, but what if it was added then as a base technology and part of Fallout 76, and having Bethesda Game Studios Austin add multiplayer to the engine was, it would be a base feature in all future titles. And to be clear here, I don't mean Starfield having a full-on multiplayer mode, but just something simple, being able to play the game with a couple of friends. A simple co-op option for those who enjoy or want that. I personally think it'd be a lot of fun. And technically, even if you look at a lot of the interviews, Todd Howard keeps saying how Starfield is a single player focused game, but thus far I've actually not heard him confirm it was actually single player only. So who knows, maybe this is just a crazy theory I do have, but it is something I could see popping up in the future. It'd be another pretty cool and fun reveal. Although definitely something they have to be careful with because of course Bethesda plus multiplayer doesn't have the best reputation right now. Which, speaking of things with a bad reputation, I think paid mods are going to come back with Starfield. There are even rumors now of Creation Club coming back with Fallout 4 or more likely Skyrim, and Todd Howard keeps mentioning in interviews how he wants to add additional ways for modders to get paid, and he loves creating those opportunities. We already know Bethesda is working on Fallout 5 after the Elder Scrolls 6, meaning that we won't have a Starfield 2 anytime soon. A steady flow of mod content that costs money and Bethesda gets a cut of those profits seems like a perfect way to keep the game not only active but also monetized. Starfield has 1,000 largely empty planets that can be filled. To me, it is just one of those things that has to be making a lot of sense to Bethesda and Microsoft from a business perspective. Yeah, I don't think this is going to replace free modding. I think Starfield will have free modding, but I think down the line, paid mods will come back. And if I'm right about this, you'll probably see this clip from June 2022 in a future video when I brag about being right or calling this. But overall, those are some of my thoughts and my opinions on Starfield and what we saw, and just combining it all together with interviews, leaks, and more. I'm incredibly excited for this game. I'm very curious to see when we actually see and hear more. We're kind of in a weird situation now where we don't really know. Could be a long time, could be 6 months before we actually see anything else. We have QuakeCon and Gamescom on the horizon though. It'd be cool if we got more interviews or even some more looks at gameplay and other features. And thanks again to Hello Games for sponsoring this video. It does truly help out the channel. With that said though, as always again, I thank you all for watching. I do hope you guys enjoyed this one, but with that, I hope to see you all next time. Later.